Ready to roll here?
Okay.
And action.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. I appreciate the hard work that, I know a lot of work goes into hosting an event like this, so I really appreciate it. Just a little bit about myself, which I don't like to talk about, but my precious, beautiful wife over here, Laura, my better half, married 31 whole years. We homeschooled our children from day one. One of them is a nurse, the other one's a nursing student, another one's an arborist, and another one is working in a jewelry store in Alaska. She's basically running the place. So we did pretty well for being a homeschooled parents. And I served on the staff of the JBS for 26 years, from 1990 to 16 to 17, and I'm the co-founder of Camp Constitution, which we started in 2009, and in 17 I became a full-time Camp Constitution director. And I'm a member of the Sons of the American Revolution, and a U.S. Army veteran, spent almost 2 years in Germany, West Germany, in a field artillery unit. That's why my hearing makes so great. And also almost a year in the 101st Airborne, and then some time in the Army Reserves. And so I'm very glad that I'm able to come here today and talk about. So if you hit the light so you can see the PowerPoint. Hopefully the camera will pick it up. So anyway, just a little bit about Camp Constitution. Oh, that's a little bit too far advanced. No. It looks better on this on my screen than it does here. Anyway, we're a New Hampshire-based charitable trust, and among other things, we run a week-long family camp. Our camp is coming up July 14th to the 19th in Plainfield, New Hampshire. Everybody knows where that is? Just south of Lebanon. And right now we get about 70 or 80 people signed up. We've never had that many signed up this early. We also have a ladies retreat coming up in two weeks from now in Alton, New Hampshire at the Alton Christian Community Center. We still have room. You can see my wife about it. And we also have a weekend retreat coming up, a family retreat coming up at the Camp Sentinel in Tuftonboro, New Hampshire in late September. The lady on the left is one of our guest instructors. How many people have watched the movie Unplanned, the Abby Johnson story? Oh, you should see it. It's a great movie. She played the abortion nurse in that movie. And what's interesting is that she was an abortion nurse in her unsaved days, and she tells this great story from darkness to light. We have this obscure journalist that's going to be one of our guest instructors. We're hoping that coming to our camp will catapult his career. His name is Tucker Carlson. I can say very obscure. And the reason why he's coming to camp isn't because of my incredible connections. It's not that. But Professor Willie Soon, the gentleman in the center of the photos, he's been one of our instructors since, I think, 16. He is one of the world's top atmospheric scientists. He basically exposed what's called the hockey stick graph back in '04. You know, you had this, oh, look at, climate's terrible, we're all going to burn up. And he said, you forgot the medieval warming period. Oh, you forgot the medieval cooling period. And by that little graph, it measured like a degree. You know, and, you can do a lot with graphs, you know. And so Willie was called, one of his people reached out to him and said, will you come on, be interviewed? He said, absolutely. So now Tucker has a place in Florida and a place in Maine, but in January, he's a smart guy, he was in Florida, he wasn't in Maine. So Willie actually asked for some support. You know, he said, he's been interviewed a lot of times, but never like Tucker Carlson. So he got a hold of me by email, and I said, I'll put you in touch with Vince Ellison. And I'll talk about Vince in a few seconds. I said, he knows, he's a personal friend. So they were talking to each other. So anyway, he went down there, and Tucker, I guess, a really down-to-earth guy. And I said to him, Willie, make sure you promote Camp Constitution. You know, I had some of the pamphlets he already had. He said, oh, absolutely. He gets down there, and he started, meeting him, and he got a picture with him. And the minute he mentioned Camp Constitution, he said, Tucker's eyes lit right up. He said he was visibly excited. Where is it? Where is it? And anyway, he looked at that. Oh, yeah, I'll be there. So we don't know what day he'll be there, but we'll announce that a little bit down the road. When the interview was aired everywhere, on X, on YouTube, on Rumble, and all. We got, within about 4 or 5 days, over 50,000 views on our website, $2,200 unsolicited. Somebody from Romania donated $100 to us after watching Willie. Well, a bunch of book orders, and we had families. Now, Willie gave a 2-minute unscripted, from the heart infomercial. And it was, he said, we're very tiny, 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 but if you live in California, you need to come. And he said, you know, we talk about Jesus, but not all the time, not just Jesus. It was great. We just love Willie. So Willie has 2 sons, Benjamin and Franklin. He just loves his cat. Oh yeah, yeah.
That's awesome.
And when we raised the Christian flag on City Hall Plaza in Boston, Willie, his 2 boys showed up. One plays the trumpet. He wanted to learn the trumpet so he could play taps and reveille at camp. The other one plays the violin. We raised the flag to Amazing Grace as they were playing on it. Okay, so these are promotional flyers of some of our events. The gentleman in the middle, you can barely see it, that's Reverend Stevie Kraft. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, Nashua City Hall, we are raising the Christian flag, and he'll be there with us. He's our camp chaplain, one of our speakers. And Mr. Vince Ellison, you can't really see him too well here. Vince is the author of 3 books and a documentary. The documentary is entitled, Will You Go to Hell For Me? Now, he doesn't want people to go to hell. The theme of that, he said, if you embrace the Democratic Party agenda, you will go to hell. And he doesn't mince his words. Now, he's not a shill for the Republican Party. People, you must support Republicans. Because there's probably a lot of Republicans, unfortunately, going to hell because of their agenda, too. So I got a chance to meet him. We become friends. I met him. He lives near Lynchburg, Virginia. And first time I had breakfast with him 2 years ago. We sat in the restaurant for 4 hours. I think they want to charge rental fees. You know, it's like we were old friends. And I saw him again this past summer. So he's going to be up for an engagement in Alton on Saturday evening, 7 o'clock at the Alton. Oh, by the way, if you'd like to get on our email list, if you're not already on it, just and I don't overwhelm you with emails, so don't worry about that. Vince, he's going to, so it's going to be the Alton. That would be, I think it's May 4th. It's the first Saturday in May. We also have an afternoon on a Saturday, and I know if I asked Megan to book it, it would have been done. But we're going to use a church in Loudon, and there were some issues. Like I say, he's a pretty outspoken guy. He doesn't pull his punches. And I said, people get a little wishy-washy. You don't want to offend anybody. Well, I think we should be offending more people with the truth. If it's truthful, then we need to offend. So we should nail it down, and if we don't, you'll be getting a call because we may use this place here.
All right.
But he's also, his 3 books, one of the books is called The Iron Triangle. That means that he said the black clergy, the black politician, and the black social worker that deliver the vote to the Democratic Party, to the demise of the people in that community. And we saw an example of that in Boston. That center that was used by in Roxbury, Melina Cass Community Center, that was used by the community for lots of things. Sorry, illegals or migrants. So and all the black leaders, all of the liberal black leaders, say a word. They all supported or kept their mouth shut. Black Lives Matter, Boston, went to their Facebook page. Not a peep. They're all upset about a drugstore closing. Well, because they're being robbed 25 times, 25 times a day. So they had to close up. So Vince is just great, and so I hope you can make it to that. We also housed the Samuel Blumenfeld Archive. Sam was a dear friend of mine. He was a pioneer in the homeschool movement. Sam was one of the very first to use the term deliberately dumbing down back in the early 60s when most people had no clue whatsoever. And by the way, I'm not a fan of Malcolm X, but he did say something. I've been quoting him a lot lately. He said, only a fool will allow your enemy to educate your children. There are a lot of fools in this country, and we wonder why. How come our children hate us? How come they think we're fascists? How come they turned me in when they saw a picture of me down at the Capitol? Because you put them in these schools, and they destroyed their mind. They turned you against you and your country. That's why. And that's why homeschooling is so important. So he willed me most of his papers, his writings, his work, and thanks to some very talented people, Mark Affleck. Well, he's our camp newspaper editor when we have our camp. He PDF'd and digitized a lot of stuff, and it's all free. Donations, of course, are accepted. Go to the website, you'll see the drop-down, and it has his alpha phonics, where you can actually teach people how to read the way you should be through phonics. And even adults. Many adults are functionally illiterate, and they've used his alpha phonics, and they become literate after that. We also have a handwriting course. Remember cursive?
Yeah.
How many people had cursive in school? Yeah. Today, it's sort of like a lost art. It's really sad. And we have a YouTube channel. We have over 1,000 videos, and we have most of our classes over the years at camp, and a lot of things we do during the course of the year. And we just got, in the last month, over 5,000 new subscribers. So these are close to almost 16,000. One of the videos that we put up from it was actually a 1966 film, Dan Smoot. Dan Smoot, if you were an old Bircher from the 60s, you knew him very well. He was one of the first to have conservative commentary on TV. We have a lot of his like 10-minute segments. People would buy the time in local affiliates. It wasn't syndicated in those days. And the one that people are watching is called Republics and Democracies. That's an interesting perspective. So we've got close to 250,000 views just in the last 2 or 3 months. And so we're very excited. And then they will look at some of the other stuff that we have available. So we also have a publishing arm. And of course, we're talking about one of the book that we also have a few here at the table. One of them is called the 1928 Army Manual. And they say, Army Manual? Like, what the heck do I want that for? This is a history book. They wanted to teach soldiers why they would fight and die for this greatest country in the world. And this is incredible stuff. It says that, you know, we're a republic. It says democracies lead to communism. And what happened was when Franklin Roosevelt became president, the New Deal Democrats, they destroyed as many of these books as possible. Disappeared all across the bases. But some survived, and we get it in a PDF version. And I think this may be the first time it was put back in print since 1928. I'm not certain about that, but I've seen no other copies other than the print version anyway. We also have one of our dear good friends, Paul Embretson. He's an artist. He's a traditional school artist. And he did an article in New American called Revolutionary Art back in the late 80s. He updated it. And a few years ago, I said, can we put it back in print? And there it is right here. So we've got some of these there as well. So, okay. The racist roots of Planned Parenthood and its legacy of death. Now, most of us have heard of Planned Parenthood and know that it's not exactly a nice group of people, the kind of things they do. But I want to read that's on the cover. One of the letters that I discovered that was published, and I'll go back to it in a few minutes. This is Sanger right here, laid to the left. Who's ever heard of Dr. Gamble, Clarence Gamble? That name is not too well known, and it should be. So she's writing to him, 1952. When I see the schoolyards all over the country filled with roaring, shrieking children, I am not sure they accomplished a thing. What was her goal, to kill everybody? She hears children on schoolyards and she says, I shouldn't be hearing that? That was one sick, depraved human being. Now, this is only 98 pages. It's mostly, and by the way, thank you very much for helping me edit this. But there's some really incredible things that I don't go into a lot of detail about Sanger, just more the correspondence and looking at evidence and proof of their racist roots. But there was a documentary called Maafa 21. Now, who speaks Swahili? Other than my wife. You don't speak. Maafa means genocide or mass murder in Swahili. And it's a documentary. It's kind of long, but it's an excellent documentary exposing Planned Parenthood. The cover in the middle, Grand Illusions, The Legacy of Planned Parenthood by George Grant. I read this back in the late 80s. So that's an excellent book. You could probably find it online for maybe $5 or $6. However, when you wrote books back then, there was no internet for the most part. You had to go to libraries, so he had good research. He actually read almost everything Sanger wrote, and he highlighted the stuff, leaving no page unturned in no uncertain terms of her racist and Nazi background. And I didn't mention this movie. There were 3 good pro-life movies that came out in the last 7 or 8 years. The first one was Gosnold, America's Biggest Serial Killer. It was about the abortionist in Philadelphia. And that's a little of the gruesome side. Thank you. The second one was the Unplanned, the Abby Johnson story, which our friend there, who's one of our speakers, is going to be at camp. And then the third one came out, Roe v. Wade. Now this movie is really special to me for 2 reasons. First reason is the woman I dedicate the book to, her character is depicted in the movie, Dr. Mildred Jefferson. And the actress that plays her, she's become friends of ours, Stacey Dash. Actually, to be dog sitting her dog tomorrow. Not tomorrow, but in a few days. So I recommend that movie. Now, who knew who knows about Dr. Mildred Jefferson? Just one person. And how'd you hear about her?
From the John Burgess.
Through me. The John Burgess. Dr. Jefferson was the first black woman to graduate from Harvard Medical School. I was one of her drivers. It was like a reverse driving Miss Daisy. I wasn't doing it I would volunteer. And when you picked up she never drove. You picked her up in Cambridge at the P&H Deli. You expected it was going to be a long day, because you didn't just take her to point A. You had to take her to get her hair done, had to take her shopping. And she had a GPS brain. She knew every little side street all over Greater Boston. Yeah, incredible. Sam Blumenfeld said she was the most brilliant person he ever met. And he met a lot of brilliant people. She was also a pioneer in the Right to Life movement. And she had in the movie, she's got a very serious role. I mean, Stacy plays a very serious. She had an incredible sense of humor. She used to laugh at my bad jokes, so very diplomatic too. But you can see a video of her when she was much younger. She died in 2010. I think her last speaking engagement was at our camp. She did like a 10-minute presentation on Obamacare, and you can see that on our. So shortly after the horrible Roe v. Wade decision came out, she said this: "I am not willing to stand aside and allow the concept of expendable human lives to turn this great land of ours into just another exclusive reservation where only the perfect, the privileged, and the planned have a right to life." Dr. Mildred Jefferson. So get to know this lady. She should be a household name. Now, our camp chaplain, Reverend Kraft, at the time he was living down in New Jersey. This would be in November 2018. I was familiar with the Negro Project. I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I was doing an article on Planned Parenthood, and I found the letter online, the 3-page letter dated December 10th, 1939. And this letter was amazing. I'll go into the letter in a few seconds, but the address, I didn't really pay much attention to the address. It was sent to Dr. Clarence Gamble. He was the heir to Procter & Gamble. And he was a eugenicist, and he was into birth control and spermicides and all that stuff. It was Milton, Massachusetts, Adams Street. Now, who's familiar with Boston? Anybody? Lower Mills. It was a stone's throw from Lower Mills. And I used to live in Hyde Park. Just go through Hyde Park, Mattapan, all the time. So I was familiar with it. I said, Rev, he was coming up to do some speaking engagements. I said, we went to the deli there, Brothers Deli in Mattapan, and some soul food deli. And then we went and we did the video. And he had a copy of the 3 letters. So I said, why don't you just read the letter and comment on it, and I'll be, videotaping. And he's reading it, there's a portion where he talks about colored Negroes. He said, colored Negroes. He said, Harry, that must make you a white Negro. They were kind of humorous. There's serious stuff. But as I was videotaping, it kind of dawned on me that Prescott Bush lived about 8 or 9, maybe 7 doors down on the same road, and they lived there at the same time, 1920s to 30s. And I said, they must have known each other, right? And therefore, they must have had correspondence. I bet you if I find that, I'm going to be really a smoking gun. Well, let me just go to the next slide here. This was a 3-page letter, and I actually held the original when I did the research. I thought, the little devils, take it out. No, I can't do that. The angel said, no, you don't, Harry, you can't do it, and I really can't. But I took pictures of it. And this is the more revealing part. She said this: we do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. Good old sweet Margaret, right? Hillary Clinton's favorite. And that was a letter dated December 10, 1939. In her book, The Pivot of Civilization, Sanger said she advocated for the elimination of human weeds and for the sterilization of genetically inferior races. So she has her supporters say, oh, you really misconstrue that. I said, maybe, but her other comments kind of belie that contention. Now, this is all research. This isn't stuff I'm making up or I heard on Facebook, so it must be true or something. Now you can't see it too well, but that's the Bush house. That's where George H.W. was born, right? It's interesting that the day we were there, November 30th, 2018, Bush died the same day. Old H.W. died the same day. It's a private residence like the Gamble house. That's why we wanted to go across the street. And I said, look, if you're a pro-life activist, don't protest the house. It had nothing to do with it. I don't know who lives there, but Gamble died in '66, and that was a long time ago. So I knew that Prescott Bush was Planned Parenthood's first treasurer. I might have got it in the George Grant book. So I found this letter online. There's Prescott Bush right there. It says treasurer, 1947. Before it became Planned Parenthood, it was called the Human, what's it? It was Human, forget what it was called. Birth control, the Birth Control League is what it was called. Then when I went to, I did the research. Oh, there's a picture of Prescott. He became U.S. Senator from Connecticut. He looks a lot like W, doesn't he? You see the resemblance here, yeah. So I didn't find any letters between the two of them, and I thought, sometime later, well, you know what? If I was talking to you, and we were 2 doors down from each other, I'm not going to write you a letter. I'm going to talk to you. There's an old line, you know, for criminals that it's better to speak than to write.
Yes.
It's better to nod than to speak. It is better to wink than to nod, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
So why have a smoking gun if you don't need one? But if you're corresponding with someone from, Arizona, you might have to do some writing. So anyway, here's a little bit about Sanger. This is a statue of her, by the way. This statue was at the Old South Meeting House in Boston. Now, a meeting house was always a church, and people met there. That's what the town, the government would met in. People still today, some meeting houses still vote in these churches and still have civic meetings. And today it's a beautiful museum. So before I went to print, I said, I wonder if that statue is still there. Because they renamed a birth control, an abortion mill. They renamed it because she became exposed, right? So I called up and I just asked them, told them who I was, and they said, no, the statue's in storage. I said, what happened? We got a lot of complaints. So I found out that it was a pro-life activist who said, are you going to take down statues of Washington? All right, we can play this cancer culture game too. So she had her people, I think it was the Pro-Life League. So hundreds or dozens of people were calling, and they said, okay, we'll just take it down, put it in storage. But she actually did appear at the Old South Meeting House. This was a place where the Tea Party was debated. Before they actually took, they debated there. It was used for years and years, and so she was there at some point. She had violated the Comstock Act, which was an act passed in the 1870s. You couldn't send pornography through the mail, and other things. And they considered her birth control stuff to be pornography because it would be the pictures would be very revealing. So she actually had to flee to Europe. And she was quite the sex pervert. She hung out with a man named Havelock Ellis. That name alone should just, if you're buddies with him, you must be a pervert degenerate. She was born in Corning, New Hampshire. There's a Cornish, New Hampshire. Corning, New York. Her father, Michael Higgins, was a radical socialist who harbored a seething hatred of Christianity. Gee, no kidding, right? Her mother, Anne, a Catholic who had Margaret Sanger baptized, but her father's influence won over. Even today, I understand that if your father isn't part of your spiritual upbringing, by the time you're a teenager or a young adult, you will depart from the faith. That's 85%. That's how important the father is in the home. And they say, oh, a father, no. You need a mother too, but you need a father. That doesn't mean that God can work, you can still come out of that relationship, of that situation and be sound. But that's what happens. 85% of those children who are in a single family home with a mother, head of household, that went to church as young people, don't usually go back. 85%. Now some of them may go back 10 to 15 years later. She married William Sanger and had 3 children. Margaret was socialized with communists and socialists, including abortion doctor Julius Hammer. Does that name Julius Hammer sound familiar? How about Armand Hammer?
Oh.
He was Armand Hammer's daddy. Armand Hammer was the Republican communist.
And they're related to Procter & Gamble too.
No, actually, the Armand Hammer, you see that the stuff they use, the cleaner? He actually bought it for a short time. It was called Armand Hammer because it had an arm and with a hammer, right? Julius was also one of the founding members of the Communist Party USA. And he went to jail for performing illegal abortion, but they think that Armand was the actual, because he was going to medical school. I don't think he ever graduated. They think he did it, but the dad took the rap because he was a young man and would have harmed his career. She was an advocate of free love. Sleep around with everybody you want. What was that song in the 60s? If you can't be with the one you love the one you with. Oh, isn't that a great thing, right? Yeah. Don DeRio and all kinds of things come out of that, right? In her book, The Woman Rebel, or her paper, she called marriage a degenerate institution. Karl Marx had a similar view. Makes sense, she hung out with socialists, so of course. As a missionary for her sterile death cult, and that's what it is, by the way, it's a death cult. She traveled all over the world, mostly in India and Japan, okay? She died in 1966, but her legacy of death lives on. Planned Parenthood receives over $500 million of federal taxpayers' money. That doesn't include state taxpayers' money, and they perform between 40 to 50% of all abortions in this country. And they sell the body parts too. They're ghastly and grisly people. It's a miserable, horrible industry. And now, that doesn't include, according to the Hyde Amendment, Henry Hyde, who was a congressman, I think from Ohio, Indiana, somewhere around there, they had an amendment to a bill that said you can't use taxpayers' money to kill unborn babies. So that's still in effect, as much as the left wants to rescind that. But, you know, if I'm sending money to a bakery, they say, look, I don't like bread, so don't make any bread. Oh, we'll just make cupcakes. So I have all the money I can make but I can still make bread because I get other money coming in, right? So it's just a bait and switch. But a lot of states will fund abortions. So I have to look and see if New Hampshire, I'm not sure. I don't want to say it is, but I think they do, yeah. Pretty ghastly, yeah. So Dr. Gamble, he was born in 1894 in Ohio. That's where the company, Cincinnati, Ohio. He was grandson of the co-founder of Procter & Gamble. He was an heir to its fortune, and he graduated from Harvard Medical School in 1920, and that's where his papers are stored. So I didn't have to travel too far. I used to live right in the West Roxbury section of Boston. In 1947, he co-founded the Human Betterment League. And guess who he co-founded it with? Some of you people might be wearing their underwear. Haynes. I think I have some. I'm wearing some Haynes. James Haynes was, and their goal was to, they were eugenics, and they were also in favor of forced sterilization. Now today you might not realize that there were over 30 states in this country from the early part of the 1900s up until the 70s that allowed forced sterilization. It wasn't just black people, it was people they considered to be feeble-minded or retarded or what have you. New Hampshire repealed their law in 1959. Now they want to have a so-called assisted suicide. By the way, call your state rep. I don't know if they were supposed to reconsider the vote.
I think the reconsideration passed too.
So did they vote and take a second vote on it?
I think so.
Did you know how it went?
I think they passed, I think it, like by 5 votes.
Well, anyway,
It still has to go through the Senate.
call your senator and say there's no such thing as assisted suicide. Suicide means you take your own life, right?
Right.
So you are an accomplice to murder.
Right.
The druggist who fills the prescription, the doctor who gives the prescription, even the clerk who knowingly, hey, I know this is a kill pill. All these people, we don't need, I said, look, you guys made a mistake when you had forced sterilization. Don't make another mistake here. And it took you 50 years to change it. Don't make another one, please. And you need, the Senate will hear, if it passed the House, then it will go to the Senate. And there's 14 Republicans. By the way, a lot of Republicans support this too. And there's nothing libertarian about killing yourself.
It actually was a Republican-sponsored bill.
No, actually there was a co-sponsored. It was like, I think two, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, so, and then he started something called the, I'll read it here. It was called the Pathfinder Fund. Today it's called Pathfinder International. And they're headquartered in Washington, D.C. And their mission is mainly in, guess what, sub-Saharan African countries, in India. And they do the same thing that International Planned Parenthood does. They acknowledge the racist roots of his founder, but so what? They still carry out his mission. So what does he care? Oh, we're just associating himself with this horrible gambler. He hated black people. He was a racist and a white supremacist. But we're doing his mission. So what difference does it make, right? And okay, so all of the letters that I found are in here. I'm not going through all of them, but just some of the more odious ones. This is one of the first ones. Now, has anyone heard of the Puerto Rican Project? I mentioned the Negro Project. Now, I've been a pro-life activist since 1988. I know a lot of people, local, statewide, even some national people. None of them have heard of the Puerto Rican Project until I brought it up. And I never heard about it until they found these letters. The Puerto Rican project was where Puerto Rican women in Puerto Rico were used as guinea pigs to test the birth control pill. I'll get into a little bit. So this was the first, this was in the late 30s. At Gamble, let's see, it was to Clarence Gamble from one of the doctors involved. And he said, Puerto Rico, they had very lax laws when it came to birth control, so it was an ideal place. This was part of that 3-page letter, the Negro Project letter. This is after she said we don't want the word to get out that we wish to exterminate them. She says this: why the colored Negroes have great respect for white doctors, they, black doctors, can get closer to their own members and more or less lay their cards on the table, which means their ignorance, superstitions, and doubts. The minister's work is also important. We do not want word to get out that we wish to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more militant, rebellious members. Yeah. Nice, sweet. No. You always have to ask yourself, who funds this? Money had to come from somewhere. And what they did was they just had pilot projects in certain black communities in the South. They wanted to see how it went, and then from there they go national. And they canceled it. Only lasted for 4 or 5 years. But it doesn't matter. You test a product, you market the product. You don't have to test it anymore. It's now nationwide. And by the way, the black population in this country is at a steady 13. Even with immigration from some African countries. Interesting. New York City, half of the pregnancies of black women end in abortions. She's had an incredible impact in the black community. This is the guy who, Albert Lasker, he was the man who funded the Negro Project. Now, how many people are in advertisement, or have you studied advertisement in college? One person. If you're really into it, and there may be an advertisement hall of fame, he would be like the Babe Ruth. He was considered the head, he was the founder of the modern advertisement movement. If you're a female and you smoke cigarettes back in the 30s and 20s, it's probably because of an ad that he drew up. You remember that Virginia Slim commercial? Yeah. You've got your own cigarette now, baby, you've come a long, long way. You can get cancer like your husband and die, you know, and get those lungs all messed up. Isn't that great? We've come a long way. He gave over $20,000, at least $20,000. That's $500,000 today. And a lot of the letters kept on referring to him. Oh, will he be approved this? He'll approve of that. Oh, we got to kind of kowtow to him. This is his wife, Mary Lasker. Her first husband was an art dealer, very wealthy. Now, see, these socialist women like to marry rich guys, don't they? Huh? Like, well, Hillary didn't marry a rich guy, but she married a guy that was up and coming, right? So this fiercely independent, and she was a close associate of Margaret Sanger. She ran one of her first birth control places. So that tells you that she was probably a degenerate as well, a sexual degenerate. And well, she divorced the art dealer and married Lasker. Keep it in the family, so forth. She was much younger. They formed the Lasker Foundation, which exists to this day. If you go to their website, you say, okay, they must have really found out about Lasker and Mary, and they're really exposing them for racist and white supremacists. No. The picture, you can't see it too well on the left, they have nothing but high regard for the founders. And here's a picture of Mary with Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was one of the first presidents to make population control a priority. And he was also the first, there was 2 recipients of the Margaret Sanger Award. The first one, he was one of the recipients. You know, he didn't show up, but somebody who's going to shock you did. And some people may not want to hear this, but I'm dealing with research. I'm not dealing with opinion, just fact. Yeah, so they're the ones that funded it. They got a free ride. Also, the Lasker Foundation also lobbied for socialized medicine and for the federal funding of medical research. Well, didn't that go well for us? Isn't that great? When you get federal government involved, you know, people say there's strings attached. They're not strings. You can break a string. They come with chains. Now, I have a friend, he's deceased now. He was part of the Acid Rain Participation Project, Dr. Michael Kaufman. You remember when acid rain, it was going to, everything, the trees were all going to die, all the lakes. So in the 1980s, he was one of the research scientists. They came back and said, you know, this acid rain isn't really a big deal. He said, all these lakes are just reverting to their natural acidic because the trees aren't catching on fire like they used to 100 years ago. And if you want to alkaline, you can throw some lime, you know, for pennies on the dollar. And the person in charge said, that's not the way we want. Those aren't the results we want. And that's when Michael Kaufman ended up leaving that. And he became one of the top spokesmen exposing Agenda 21 in the environmental movement. And he wrote a book called Saviors of the Earth, exposing the environmental history of the environmental movement. And that was what it took him, his so-called red pill. Here's a letter from Gamble to Sanger, January 25th, 1940. And by the way, the letter started in 39 and ended in 52. That's all I found at the library. I don't know if there's any more after that. Nothing during World War II. It was kind of interesting. Nothing during World War II. I guess people were dying, so that made them happy. You know, people were getting killed. So their population control is working. First we asked Dr. Siebels. Dr. Siebels, I couldn't find much about him, but he was one of the doctors that oversaw these various clinics in the black communities. What plan he would suggest for a colored demonstration. He said Berkeley County in South Carolina with a large Negro population would work well for that. The Negroes would come flocking in. You see how demeaning they have, how little they think about black people. Mr. Laska also approved of an urban project paying a colored physician to open a birth control center. It's actually in Tennessee. And by the way, the word colored back then was considered a neutral term. It wasn't meant to be offensive. And said the same thing with Negro. Today, if you say that, you know, you might get into a little trouble depending on who you are, right? This is very fascinating too. I'm going to post this on Ayanna Presley. I see her Facebook page.
Yes.
I'm not a troll. I'm an educational activist. Right? she's got a picture of her. So who was the guy that wrote the race anti-racist book? He's a professor at Harvard. Anyway, she's pictured with him, and oh, we're working to fight racism. No, they're working to promote racism. And you know, Jack, the guy used to own, no, it's now X. Jack.
Oh, Twitter.
Yeah, the beard, ridiculous beard.
Dorsey?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Kindy. He gave him $10 million to start his research project in Boston. So that's not check. He was a white guy. So it was the big corporations that are actually pushing this rate, and they want a race war. In my opinion, they want a race war. Everything about race, nothing about let's get together, let's come together, let's work together. No, it's all about racism, systemic racism. And so anyway, this lady, she was a doctor. She was a close associate of Sanger. In the letter she sent to Sanger, she said, our Negro birth rate is too high. So I'm going to post this letter and say, just what is the right birth rate, Ayanna? Can you address this? Because you belong to Planned Parenthood. You support it.
Yes.
Please tell me what the birth rate should be.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet she won't say a word. Not a word. That you say a word when the illegal aliens took over their center. Not a word. But the drugstore closing, that's racism. And by the way, these letters, there's a picture of her, Dr. Lydia DeFilibus. She wrote for Sanger's Birth Control Review. This is where you found a lot of interesting stuff, and a lot of the stuff's online. She was against using the blood of black donors for whites and performed surgical sterilizations for black, well, I should say on black women. A real sweetheart. That's the kind of people. Now, if nothing evil has been funded in the last 100 years or so without Rockefeller money, right? Nothing of any major consequence anyway. The Kinsey report, that filthy degenerate Kinsey, you know how he died? I can't, he's in Play Company. He was a sadomasochist, so he died. It was pretty gruesome. He was a zoologist, knew nothing about people. But he experimented on little children. He had his fellow sex perverts actually use little children and abuse them for their study. Rockefeller funded that Kinsey report. And it came out and said, oh, 10% of the population is homosexual, everybody's everyone does. No, everyone didn't do this kind of stuff, right? It was a big lie. And the Rockefellers actually had to take their money away, reluctantly, because the word was getting out. So Sanger is sending a letter. Now this is 7 years after World War II. How many people died in World War II? Millions of people. All over the world, not just in Europe, but all over the world. The population, and mostly young men of father, those who would father children. So she has a long list of things that they want to do, but this is important. And I wasn't sure the date, but the International Planned Parenthood got started in 1952, so it was probably a year or two before that. To bring about the universal acceptance of Planned Parenthood, eugenic implications, that means to make the race superior, you know, to work out all the impurities in races and eliminate those that weren't so pure. Methods of contraception, sterility, and Sanger's letter to the Rockefeller. So she didn't mention abortion, but it was mentioned in one of the letters. Okay, well here's the letter I mentioned very early on. It is difficult for me, my dear Clarence, to review the history of accomplishments, for certainly when I see the schoolyards all over the country filled with roaring, shrieking children, I am not sure I accomplished a thing. Then she went on to say, Shaw was George Bernard Shaw, the British author, playwright. Now, Shaw wrote a book about 1905. It was called The Intelligent Woman's Guide to Socialism. And in this book, she said, and I'm paraphrasing, under socialism, you will live well. But if it's determined that you're not worthy of it, you will be killed in a kindly manner. Isn't that sweet of her, you know, him? That's his mindset. And he wasn't kidding. This wasn't a joke. These people are serious. So he said, if birth control could become a practical reality, it would change the history of the world. That's how important they look. And Gamble, I didn't include him in the book, but Gamble would send letters to the, what's the prize they get in Norway?
Nobel?
Thank you, a Nobel Prize. He was lobbying that she gets a Nobel Prize. She never got one. I don't think she was ever nominated, thankfully. And by the way, she had plenty of crick. I was very happy when that Teddy Roosevelt was against her. And I think I might have mentioned it in the book. Now, this was the first time I saw the word abortion mentioned. July 11, 1952, Sanger to Gamble. Now, she had been on record as being against abortion at some point, but I'm sure that she changed her mind very quickly. In fact, in the movie Roe v. Wade, now that movie, most of the movie is the Dr. Bernard Nathanson and his character, and he died a while ago. But he and Larry, I can't remember his last name, Larry Lader, L-A-D-E-R, he was a close associate of Sanger. He and Bernard Nathanson founded NARAL, N-A-R-A-L, National Abortion Rights Something League. And you know when you heard about, oh, there's 100,000 back alley abortions every year? They made that up. They totally lied about it. And in the movie, it showed a scene in the show Maude, where they're regurgitating the propaganda that these guys, I mean, these guys, the media is more than happy to, whatever they said was pushed as truth. So, anyway, so she said, this is the, he said here is, sterilization and abortion, not particularly stressed, but the Indian Committee, that would be the country of India, seems to think that both sterilization and abortion are of great interest in India and should be given special attention. Special attention. So that shows that she seemed to be in favor of abortion. Now, Gamble wrote to the Japan's public health director 7 years after World War II. Japan lost 3 million people. A lot of them, again, young men. But there wasn't enough. We still got to have more. We got to get rid of more people. And they were very receptive. And interesting, there was a survey done some years ago to find out the most racist countries. Well, it must be the United States because what's the standard of the racist? No, the English-speaking nations are the least racist. Japan was the most racist. Now I know some wonderful Japanese, not saying all, but just saying overall. And so they didn't like the big noses any more than these people like the Japanese, you know. They're both working against, let's have fewer white people, fewer black people, and there's fewer Japanese people. But he was trying to get an appointment for Sanger to visit the emperor, Hirohito. And the emperor never had a private appointment, but I guess they did meet in some social function. And anyway, now this letter to Gamble from Dr. Rock, Dr. John Rock. Now, he was the father of the pill. And he was a good Catholic, right? Just like our current president, good Catholic. Oh, by the way, tomorrow is National Transgender something. Awareness Day. Yeah.
Isn't that every day?
Oh,
We're aware.
I mean, it's all we are is aware of that, right? So he was from Brookline, Massachusetts, and Dr. Pincus was his colleague. He was out of Worcester, Massachusetts. And they would use rabbits to experiment with the birth control pill, and then they used mental patients at the McLean Hospital in Belmont, and some of their own patients, and then they said, you know what, let's go to Puerto Rico, because we don't have to worry about anything. We can have a good run there, right? So, next slide, please. I'll get into that in a few slides. Next slide.
Oh, that's you.
Oh! I cut that from the video. Last night I was having an advanced, and I got a little mental block here. Sorry about that.
We all looked down to see if we had a mouse with us.
February, I'd say, oh, who's supposed to do that? Oh my goodness. So this was 2 days after I was born, February 26, 1959. This letter is from Gamble to 3 of the ladies that were actually in Puerto Rico doing the guinea pig experiments. And it refers to the Puerto Rican project where 1,500 Puerto Rican women were used as guinea pigs to test the birth control pill. Yumacoa, I think I'm pronouncing it right, is the city where the project took place. Note that Gamble used the term collaborators. Usually when you collaborate, you're like a little seedy or illegal. He was giddy. He's giddy about their collaborators. Because a year later, the pill was approved by US FDA. And some of these poor women died. Not many, but one was too many. Several, maybe more. Blood clots, all kinds of... And every time they say, oh, this poor woman, oh, we'll just give her less. Lower the dose until we get it right. None of these women or their family members got a dime from Big Pharma. Nothing, for their... And you can actually find this online. But if you didn't know it existed, then you'd have no reason to look it up, right? Dr. Adeline Pendleton Satterway, she was known as the mother of the pill. What a good legacy that is, huh? Now, I think it's important, if Planned Parenthood was such a good thing, this is secular, this is man's way, not God's way. It's 2024, and they've been doing this for over 100 years. How's it working out? Let's see. Are the families better than they were 100 years ago? Are their marriages, people staying together more so? No. In 1965, 20% of black people were born out of wedlock. That was considered unacceptable. 1 out of 5. Now it's 70, 75, somewhere around, maybe a little higher. And by the way, the wages are catching up, because our families are imploding too. Yeah, isn't it? So it really isn't working out too well. And by the way, they talk about reproductive health, another term, or woman's right to choose. How many women are forced into an abortion by a husband, a boyfriend, a father, or peer pressure? And I don't know the stat. I've asked that stat. Could it be half? You remember the Charles Stewart case in Boston? They just had a 30th anniversary. Mayor Will would promote race hatred. Oh, this guy killed his wife and he blamed it was on a black. And so they had this massive manhunt, the rest of these 2 poor black guys, and it was the husband that actually killed. But they don't tell the whole story. He killed his wife and the baby, the unborn baby. And why did he do it? He wanted her to get an abortion, and she wouldn't get the abortion. So he killed them, and then he committed suicide. But they left that very important, the reason for the murder to begin with, right? Now, who funded the Puerto Rican project? You have to ask that question too, right? How many people work on a farm? International Harvester come to mind, they make tractors and all that. The McCormick Reaper, International Harvester. Catherine McCormick, lady on the left, she was the one that funded it. So all these heirs to these big corporations are the ones that have the money. How many people watched the movie The Aviator, the story of Howard Hughes? You remember the scene when he's flying into Connecticut, he's dating Katharine Hepburn, right? And he meets the parents, Hepburn's parents, and he didn't like them. Well, good for him. With all his flaws, he had a good judge of character. Katharine Hepburn, the mom, was a communist. She was upper middle class. Her husband was a doctor. They lived in Hartford, Connecticut. She was a very close associate of Sanger, which tells you a lot about Katharine Hepburn. Even the daughter said, my mother's a communist. And she said it, not negatively, but in an approving manner. So those are people that were involved. And now this is a lot of people aren't going to not like this. But Martin Luther King was the first of the first recipients of the Margaret Sanger Award, 1965. And I used to live at 199 Fairmount Avenue in Hyde Park, 02136. There was this woman that lived in Newton, Massachusetts, 199 Fairmount Avenue. The zip code was 02163. Somehow the zip codes got reversed, and I was getting some of her left-wing mail. She subscribed to Mother Jones. She got The Nation. and she was a supporter of Planned Parenthood. And I got a mailing from Planned Parenthood asking me to buy copies of Martin Luther King's speech that was made at the first annual Margaret Sanger Award in 1965 in May. The speech was a special and urgent concern. It was delivered May 5th by his wife, 66. Sanger died she wasn't at the meeting, she died shortly thereafter. And by the way, that award was given up until 2015. Hillary Clinton got one of the awards. Dr. John Rock got one of the awards, right? Faye Waddleton of Planned Parenthood, she got one of the awards. But Sanger was getting a little too controversial, a little bit too much information, so they decided to stop with this Margaret Sanger Awards in 2015. So this is I have the whole speech and I have a little critique on it, right? She launched, now King, a week or two later, he wrote to the head of Planned Parenthood, I can't remember the person's name, thanking them for the invitation. So he's not like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize who you people were. I had nothing to do with you folks. He was supporting them. So in the speech he said this, Sanger, she launched a movement which obeying a higher law to preserve human life under humane conditions. Now what's the higher law you may be referring to? Anybody have an idea? A higher law than man's law. Well, I would think, well, if you're a minister, you would think the higher law would be God's law. Because we have an obligation to obey God's law first. And any law that contradicts God's law, we shouldn't obey. By the way, it says that over the City Hall in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's still there. They may have a rainbow flag covering it up. But I did a little video of that with Reverend Steve in Kraft about 7 or 8 years ago. I said, Reverend said, where are we? He said, we're in the Bible Belt. What state? We're in the Deep South. Let's read this. And he says, yeah, we're in the Bible Belt, Cambridge, Massachusetts, right? So, and he says, to preserve under human, Margaret Sanger had to commit what was then called a crime in order to enrich humanity. And today we honor her courage and her vision, for without them there would be no beginning. And then he went on to say, the Negro constitutes half the poor of the nation. Like all poor, Negro and white, they have many unwanted children. This is a cruel evil that urgently we need to control. What's the Bible say about children? It says they're a gift of God. My son's named Nathaniel. That's Hebrew for gift. I didn't know that when we liked the name, but figured out, I like that name. Gift of God. That contradicts Scripture, clearly.
Yeah.
So whoever wrote that speech could not have been a professing Christian. King didn't write. And by the way, you know that I Have a Dream speech? That was written by a man named Stanley Levinson, who happened to be a communist. The communists know how to use the Scripture, just like the devil does, right? They twist it and torture it, but that's what they do. This guy, W.E.B. Du Bois, we've probably all heard of him. He was one of the founders of the NAACP. In fact, he was the only black founder of the NAACP. He was part of Sanger's National Negro Advisory Council in 1932. They had all these prominent blacks, and Du Bois was one of them. And by the way, Du Bois and Booker T didn't like each other too much. Because Booker T, Washington believed you get a trade, you get a skill, you get something to offer the marketplace, you can't be ignored, and you will come up, gradually. He's an intellectual. He had no use for that people. And he wrote in Sanger's Birth Control, and I made sure when I quote people, I want to make sure I just saw a Facebook meme. Facebook memes can be very dangerous things. I can put a face and a quote, and it can be totally different. I see it all the time.
Yeah.
You see an actor, and you see this quote. I said, you remember who was the actor that committed suicide from California? He was Robert Williams. He had this little thing about he was against illegal immigration, these memes from the 90s. I actually got a hold of his agent. And I said, I just want to verify, before I quote this, he said, no, I said, Robert didn't say. I said, I didn't think so. Thank you. I didn't think he said that. So just because you see a meme in a quote doesn't mean that. So this is what he said. In the Birth Control Review, you can find it. On the other hand, the mass of ignorant Negroes still breed carelessly and disastrously, so that the increase among Negroes, even more than the increase among whites, is from that part of the population least intelligent and fit, and least able to rear their children properly. Yeah, W.E.B. Du Bois. When they have Black History Month, oh, he's highly regarded. He's on a stamp too. I could put rascals on stamps. Now, this guy He was a no-holds-barred Klansman. He actually went to Germany, met Adolf Hitler. His name was Ludwig Stoddard. And by the way, he and Dubois and Stoddard had a famous debate. And it looked like Dubois wiped the floor with him, you know. Didn't change his position any. He was a founding member of Samuel's Birth Control League, a member of the KKK, and he was from Brookline, Massachusetts. I should do a video of his home and see how far Michael Dukakis lives from him. I don't know. Remember Michael Dukakis? We want to forget, but we don't. We were talking about him, and I remember that I'm not a fan of George H.W. Bush, but in that debate, when they got a little acrimonious, and Bush said, I was hoping we would leave this on friendly terms. I said, I want to get a home. I want to get a ride home in your tank. You remember that? You remember that ad he did with the tank? Yeah, that was great. Yeah. So, and then we come across this guy, Ernst Rudin. He was the director of the Nazi sterilization program. He also wrote for Birth Control Review, Margaret Sanger. And the Nazis learned this stuff from us, not the other way around. It was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and the Nazi regime. He was personally decorated by Hitler. In fact, there's a picture of him with a little Nazi regalia. He escaped the Nuremberg trials. Why? Well, because he spent most of his time in Washington, D.C., even when Hitler was in power. And it would be kind of embarrassing when they start doing a little research. Well, how about all these Americans to help you out? How about all these Englishmen to help you out? So they just said, they were kind of, when they decided who was going to be at Nuremberg, oh, this guy only killed a couple of, we'll let him go. This guy had ties to I.G. Farben, yeah, we'll let him. But this guy we'll go after. So I have to admit, they had to marvel at her genius. You know, these superhero, like the villain, if only he uses power for good. She had Nazis, Klansmen, and communists all working together for the same goal.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, the next to last slide. The legacy of death. This is a young lady that was procuring aborted babies for Planned Parenthood. So they sell them for medical research. Pretty ghastly. You know, we talk about Dr. Mengele, the Nazi doctor that experimented on, we should condemn him, right? But Planned Parenthood does it too. Also want to point out, every single black Democrat in Congress supports Planned Parenthood. There's either a member, there's only one Democrat in the whole Congress that's pro-life. Henry Cuellar, he's from Texas, and the Democrats primary, they try to get him out. Now he still votes very left-wing, but he's only pro-life. The pro-life movement was primarily started by Catholic Democrats. 1971, there was a bill, an amendment introduced in Congress, in the House, by John Schmidt. He was Nixon's congressman. He got 15 votes. Before Roe v. Wade, he got 15 votes. In the church, the Protestant church, most of them were either promoting it, or I'm not talking about the born again, I'm talking about the ones that now fly rainbow flags.
Right.
But the other churches were silent. This will never happen. That movie, Roe v. Wade, the guy Wade, who was the Attorney General of Texas, he never thought in a million years that the court would rule that the abortion is fatal. Yeah. And they did.
That's what happens if you don't speak up.
So, I'm wrapping it up. A little call to action. If you're in this room, my host is the John Birch Society. Get involved with them. That's one way. Because, in fact, the JBS actually had an ad hoc committee back in 1968, a pro-life ad hoc committee. Long before Roe v. Wade. They had some great, way back then, when most people didn't really want to pay attention. Pray that God will change the hearts and minds of those in the abortion industry, as well as the people who support it, like our friend, Julia Wilkinson. And there's lots of people leaving the industry, and they've really become great. Bernard Nathanson, when he left the abortion industry, he did a video called The Silent Scream, which you can find on YouTube. This would be back in the 80s. So some of the best people are those that were part of this horrible industry. But when I saw Chuck Schumer in front of the Supreme Court, and you know, when you see Schumer, he's got those granny glasses, he's always reading stuff. You know, the only time I didn't see him reading was he was haranguing. And he was saying, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, you're going to reap, he uses Old Testament, you're going to reap the whirlwind. If you don't allow him to kill babies, we're going to come after him. He didn't even need any notes. And he had that little evil smile. And what happened about a year and a half later? someone tried to kill Gorsuch, didn't they? Or Kavanaugh, right? And his family, he had his ties, yeah. He got away with that. You imagine if it was a prominent Republican senator that did that?
Yeah.
Oh, he would have been kicked out, rightfully so. So when at first I got angry, and I thought, this guy's going to hell. How can people in this great country be so evil? But they need our prayer. Maybe one of these people, imagine if AOC left her socialism and red pill. Oh, she'd be ignored by the left, but wouldn't she be a powerful force for good? So that may happen, so let's keep that, pray for that. Support a crisis pregnancy center. I know there's one in Rochester, I think we must have one in Concord. I know there's one in fact, there's an entity that I'm involved with, and we support the one in Lebanon, New Hampshire.
There's one in Manchester.
One in Manchester. Now, they're under the gun, literally, since the Roe v. Wade was leaked. They've been assaulted, some were firebombed, vandalized, and they seem to have the support of the Democratic Party, the Department of Justice. You know, when I see some of these Senate hearings, and they had, who's the nasty beta male who's the head of the Justice Department. You want to forget these people's names. So one of the Senate Republican senators has said, well, you're rounding up all of these old ladies who took selfies at I'm paraphrasing, at the Capitol building. You've got a pro-life guy who was involved in an altercation in Philadelphia. Because Philadelphia didn't want to press charges. He was just defending his son. You raided his house with the FBI agents at 6 in the morning with guys with automatic weapons, or semi-automatic weapons anyway. You say that traditional Catholics, you're spying on them, but you can't find, how many arrests have you made of these people who have vandalized? Well, no, you can't arrest any of them, but you can arrest these people. Yeah. So support a local pro-life group, or start one, and get copies of this book. And by the way, I just uploaded this book on our website. It's a free download. If you go to campconstitution.net and you scroll down to downloads, you'll find it. There's a lot of other good stuff there, but you can find it and help yourself to that. And with that, I want to thank you, and God bless, and enjoy the rest of the day.